Hey friends, this is Laura with Laura B. Flosstube. This is the first video in a series. We're going to start cutting our backgrounds for the Bloom quilt along. Now remember that our Be Prepared week is November 5th, 2023. So you have that full week to just get things together, get your backgrounds cut, get your shapes traced. You can cut your fabrics in advance for your blocks if you want to. If you want to do block by block each week, that's fine too. It's however you want to do it. Remember, it's your quilt. So I'm just going to share how I'm doing my process to do the quilt along, but that doesn't mean it's the only way. Just keep that in mind, and I hope you pick up some tips. So to cut my background fabric, remember I had that huge stack, different piles of fabric, and what I've done is I've just went through and I've pulled out all of my low volumes. So basically my white backgrounds with maybe a little bit of print on it, pulled all of those out, put those in their separate stack, and now I'm just going to go through there and see if I have enough to do the backgrounds for my blocks. I'm not going to worry about too much if I have like this many blues, this many reds, this many yellows, whatever. I'm going to start by cutting 2 of each print that I can find that I can cut 2 of. If I only get 1 from a scrap, then that's fine too. Basically, I just need 20 squares. Now, the cutting guide tells you to cut these at 9 inches, which, we're going to trim them down to 8.5, so that's probably going to be fine. But I like a little more wiggle room. So I'm going to cut my background squares at 9.5. And just so happens I have a 9.5 inch ruler. So I'm just going to layer my fabrics up, cut out my 9.5 inch squares, set those to the side, and I'll have that part of my Bloom quilt cut. All right, so I use the Quilter Select Rotary Cutter, and I like it because it gives me a little more weight, so I don't have to press so hard when I'm cutting. I actually have 10 layers stacked up here. I have 2 prints, this little circle one here and this little, I don't even really know what that is, a little flower or whatever it is. Those, I'm only going to get 1 from those, but the rest of them I'm getting 2. So I'm just going to go ahead, I have this laid so I know that I'm away from the edges on all of my layers. I'm just going to go ahead and cut these. And you'll notice that I kind of cut this way and then this way, and now I can take all of this extra fabric and move it to the side. Now these are a little bigger, so I'm going to slide those just really delicately. All right, so I'm going to cut the other 2 sides. And again, I'm using a 9.5 inch ruler, so I just need to cut around my ruler and I'll have my squares cut out. These don't have to be perfectly square because remember we're trimming these down to 8.5. So I just need to get the basic idea done. So here are 10 of my backgrounds. Okay, looks like as I went through the rest of my pile that I'm going to go ahead and use some of these prints 4 times. And I'm fine with that too. Obviously, if you want all different backgrounds, you need to find more scraps. But this is how I'm going to do mine. And I have the next 10, or the last 10 really, because this will make 20 of my fabrics lined up. And again, I'm just going to move these away a little bit just to make that a little easier. And cut these up. Okay, now that I have all 20 backgrounds cut, what I'm going to do is I'll throw them up on my design wall and kind of evenly disperse them to make sure I don't have 2 of the same ones in the same, like next to one another or something in the quilt. And then I will number them all, and when I go to bag my pieces, I'll know where they go. Okay, so we're just going to lay these out. Now I know that the quilt is 4 by 5. So I'm going to have 4 across and 5 down. So I'm just going to lay these out on the design wall and try to evenly disperse my different fabrics. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my stickers and I'm going to mark each one by what block it is. And that way when I go to bag up my pieces for the quilt and assemble my blocks, I will have my backgrounds evenly dispersed the way I see them right here. Let me add on a little bit to that. So you may be thinking, well, how are you numbering your blocks? In the cut along guide, or in the sew along guide, that you should have downloaded from Riley Blake's site, they have this page right here. Sorry for the little labels here. But each one of them, the blocks are numbered 1 through 20. So what I'm doing is just adding a little sticker to each one of my backgrounds that tell me which block that is, 1 through 20. And that's all there is to it. And then I can either leave these up here or I can go ahead and throw them in bags. If I throw them in bags, I probably didn't necessarily need to label them. But just in case something goes awry between point A and point B, I always like to have my bases covered. I know sometimes it seems like a little extra work, but let's say, oh, I don't know, the cat came in and just destroyed my design wall or something, and I would have no idea what goes where. If they already have the numbers on them before I put them in the bags, then just in case something goes wrong, because life happens and I might need to go do something before I put them in bags. So I just have that little second little check just to make sure I don't have to do this again. Okay, gang, so I'm going to bag up my backgrounds and put them in my project tote. Now you might be wondering, what the heck is she talking about? So this is just what I do for my applique quilts with Lori Holt. I have gallon Ziploc bags and they're all labeled, and I have these labeled 1 through 20. And there's, old stickers on them and stuff, but that doesn't really bother me because I know the numbers are on there, so I know this is going to work for this project too. So I have bags 1 through 20, and remember I have backgrounds 1 through 20. So I'm just going to turn these face down. They're in numerical order right now. I'm going to turn these face down, starting with number 20, putting it in the bag, and then I'm going to put it in my project tote. So then as I go along and I do the interfacing shapes and I cut the fabric, I'll just put all of those in the corresponding bag inside my tote. And when it's the week to do the block, all I got to do is grab the bag, sew the shapes, turn, and applique. Woo! So let's do this. Now I will say this quilt is pretty simple. There's not that many shapes per block, but I really just wanted to go ahead and do this so I could show you kind of my process of how I get prepared for one of the applique quilts that I do. You obviously do not have to do it like this. You could probably just use a little clip and clip your pieces together and be just as happy with this one, because like I said, there's not that many shapes in this in each block for this quilt. But if you get into some of the other quilts that she's done, there are a ton of pieces in some of those. Now the other thing I like about having these just in the bag is that when I get to that block, if I'm going to go somewhere to sew, or if I need to take the pieces with me to a guild meeting or something to turn out and shape, then I already have them all in a bag and ready to go. So it's really convenient. So I guess, my future self is thankful for my past self when it comes to times like that. Another thing you might be questioning is why I'm just throwing them in the bags. I don't press my backgrounds before I do the shapes and do the block. Now I will press them before I start putting shapes onto it, but at this point I don't care if the fabric gets wrinkled because I know I'm going to press it later on. Another reason that I put the numbers on the background fabric is because sometimes I might do 2 or 3 blocks at a time. And so I'll have all the shapes and all the pieces out. And then just to make sure I don't forget which background goes with which flower, the label is on the background. So I know which background matches up. All right, so that was just cutting the backgrounds. And you may have noticed in the video that I was using the wrong ruler. Oops. So I did recut all of my backgrounds, and they are all 9.5-inch backgrounds now. I had to use a few different fabrics, so you'll notice that in the next videos coming up when I'm doing my blocks, that the backgrounds don't match the first video, but that's because I goofed up. Thankfully, some of the border pieces that I needed were 8.5 inches long. So I used those 8.5-inch squares to get some of my border pieces. So it did end up all right. But yeah, remember to check your rulers. Hey, thanks so much for joining me for this video. I really appreciate you tuning in and playing along with my little games I play. So I will see you next time. And until then, happy stitching.